You're listening to the Chai95 Radio Hour on WWDB 860 AM in Philadelphia and streaming on the web at www.dbam.com. Let me once again thank our sponsor, Singer Financial, your source for hard money loans in the greater Philadelphia area. Singer Financial offers creative real estate financing in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware, and you can reach them at 877-746-4376. Let me welcome someone who I'm pleased to say is turning into a frequent guest. The brilliant Daniel Greenfield, sultanknish.blogspot.com. Once again, he's made it hard by having numerous incredible articles and columns since the last time he talked to us, which was really only like a week or so ago. But today, his most recent is the Universalist Holocaust, and it talks about Holocaust memory. This ties into Yom HaShoah, which was last week. That's Holocaust Memorial Day. And, well, first of all, Daniel, thanks for coming on.
It's great to have me back on again.
Well, please tell us about what you wrote, which is the difference between the Nationalists and the Universalists, which is also the difference between Never Again, which is the nationalist view, and Teach Tolerance, which is the Universalist view.
These days people hear about Obama being post-American. Well, there are two responses to the Holocaust. There's the Jewish response and there's the post-Jewish response. The Jewish response is to create and protect Jewish communities in a Jewish state. The post-Jewish response is to create a united world where there is no difference between anyone and there can't be any anti-Semitism because there aren't any Jews anymore. Now, the nationalist response has been the Jewish response. The Universalist response has been the let's get rid of Jews and that way we get rid of anti-Semitism. And that same attitude is behind the hostility toward Israel. It's behind the hostility toward traditional Jews in general.
Daniel, it's very interesting what you're bringing up because this has not unique in history. Paul of Tarsus, the Christian Paul, had the same remark. He said, no Jews and no Gentiles, it's all going to be one world, and didn't turn out to work out so well for everybody. But this idea between universalism and nationalism is not a new one, and it's interesting to see how it's playing out both here in America and in Israel. Can you comment a little bit more how you see it playing out in America and how you see it playing out in Israel?
Well, we can see it all around us. When you have Jewish institutions that don't serve Jewish needs or Jewish interests, whether that's in the United States, I'm sure you've had plenty of experiences with community organizations and Jewish organizations like that, and in Israel, where you have governments who are dedicated to the peace process about the safety and security of Israel and Jewish lives. So it's a question of where the priorities go. Now, the never again priority means that you protect Jews. The teach tolerance, the let's make an open world for everyone, let's make a borderless post-identity world, that's the one that sacrifices Jewish interests and long-term Jewish survival in order to feel good about the world.
You wrote in regard to that, and I think you're really getting at the naivety of so many Jews. So many people who are not Jewish often say, I thought Jews are supposed to be smart. But you wrote in the Universalist Holocaust, which can be found at sultanknish.blogspot.com, you wrote, the Holocaust dissolved that mirage of a better world. It was a mugging in broad daylight on the biggest street of the biggest city in the world. Its message was that there is no law or progress, that the world had not changed, and that human beings had not magically become transformed into better people because Berlin had a subway and phone calls could be made across the Atlantic. Most people did not understand that message, and to the extent that they did, they resisted it. All right. Any comment there, Bob or Dan?
My comment is I think that Daniel's dead on this issue. The idea of and you even see it in America too. The idea of this universal one world, we're all belonging to the United Nations viewpoint, and that America is an exceptional country. We have an exceptional constitution. We have an exceptional form of government. And likewise, Israel is an exceptional country. There's an argument even in Israel whether Israel is a Jewish state. In my mind, there shouldn't be even a question about such a thing. But there is, even in the left in Israel, this view of a universalist view, which means, and you're right, no Jews mean no anti-Semitism, but no Jews means no Jews, and that means not a good thing for those of us who honor the Torah and in historical Judaism and what it's offered the world.
Well, you can, Daniel, I think you said something in your column about how that worked out in the Soviet Union and the implications there.
The Jews joined up with the socialist movements, and they wound up being all but scrubbed out. On the Stalin end, there was an attempt to perpetrate a second Holocaust, something that was interrupted by Stalin's own death or assassination, depending on which theory you believe. But by the end, the Soviet Union managed to mostly eradicate Jewish identity in any meaningful and significant sense. Arguably, the Universalists have been doing that quite well in America and Europe as well, without the government coercion part.
Tell us what happens when a Universalist, as you call them, nice Jewish boys and girls who have read Anne Frank's diary, why does the message not get absorbed that is intended when people pay for trips for them to go to Anne Frank's attic? What's going on there?
The message is that, not that Jews were killed, the message is that you have strong countries with guns and soldiers and armies, and that they persecute people, and that you have to oppose the government, you have to oppose those countries, and you always have to support the underdog. That way you can characterize the Palestinian Arabs as the new Jews, and the Jews become the new Nazis, and you can characterize the United States as the new Nazi Germany. And you can do this endlessly over and over again because you haven't actually learned the lesson, the Jewish part of the lesson, the never again part.
You know, you bring up an interesting point. There are going to be some Jews there protesting tonight at Temple University here in Philadelphia when the David Horowitz Freedom Center, and you're affiliated with them, when they have their Islamic Apartheid Conference panel, and that's featuring Robert Spencer of Jihad Watch, Pamela Geller of Atlas Shrugs, Nodini Darwish of Former Muslims United, and Simon Deng, a refugee from the Sudan. That's going on at Temple tonight at 6 p.m., Temple University. And yet they're going to be, and I know this from students who go to Temple, the loudest people, even louder than the Muslims, will be liberal Jews. Can you comment about this phenomenon?
Sure. Our enemies always come from within. The people who have the most destructive mindset are the people who are Jewish, because if you split down a family, the people who leave the family are the ones who hate the family the most.
You, as usual, had some other great columns this week, and one is titled All the Morals of a Bulldozer, and there you're talking about the bulldozer as a metaphor for liberal America. Could you tell our listeners what you mean by that?
You know, it's like the old saying, when you have a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. To liberals, the hammer is government, and every single problem looks like a nail. In this case, it looks like something to bulldoze, something to drive through. Their only moral code at that point is anything that gets in the way of the hammer, anything that gets in the way of the bulldozer, anything that gets in the way of doing what they want is the enemy and has to be absolutely destroyed. And we've seen that with Obamacare. We've seen that over and over again with the Obama administration, including with Israel.
You also wrote last week a column called Afghanistan At Home, in which you talked about what, I don't think you used the term, plenty of people call creeping sharia. And it says, what's the point of being in Afghanistan to remake a nation if the problem is coming over here?
Yeah, we've got the occupation moving into the United States, is moving into Europe. If you've been following, most of the latest terrorist attacks have been coming from people who have been either in America for a while or in some cases are even American-born. We're seeing the rise of a local Taliban, a local Palestinian movement, a local Al-Qaeda. We're seeing the same thing that's happening here, and we can withdraw from Afghanistan, but we can't exactly withdraw from New York.
Yeah, in fact, I heard from CBN, I'm blanking on his name, from Northeast Philly. Why am I blanking on his name? But I heard him talking about how the Muslim Brotherhood, even Eric Stakelbeck, the Muslim Brotherhood is being welcomed into the White House now. So almost what's the point of fighting over there? You also wrote about Oprahism and the Church of Obama last week, and could you explain what you mean there?
It's the same kind of emptiness. There's a spiritual void, a vacuum, and that has to be filled with increasing distractions and the sense that you're doing something meaningful when nothing meaningful is actually taking place. That's really what you've got with Obama, the whole empty inspiration, and there was nothing to actually be inspired by except the sense that this is supposed to be inspiring. That's really been Obama's whole term. The kind of false elevation that doesn't actually take you anywhere.
That's an extremely interesting insight, that there's a need for a spiritual meaning. And I personally found that myself. Can you elaborate a little bit more on how you see that working?
We've destroyed traditional religion to a large degree. The situation is even worse in Europe, but it's already getting pretty bad in the United States. And if we look to Europe, we can see where we're going to end up with a secular society. And that creates a void. It doesn't create this super rational class that some people like to imagine. It creates an emptiness, and that emptiness is going to be filled. In Europe, it's being filled by Islam. Here we've had we've had Oprah's brief temporary entertainments, self-help quests for guidance, but in the end, there's still permanent emptiness, and that emptiness is going to be filled one way or another.
Well, let me challenge you a little bit. This might be the first time I've ever done that, but we have a strong evangelical Christian movement here where churches are filled. Isn't that making us a little bit different from Europe?
It's somewhat different from Europe, but if you look at what's going on in Europe, they've succeeded in outlawing a lot of the more conservative religious movements, or making it very hard for them to operate by essentially criminalizing some of their message, even the Bible. For example, quoting some aspects of the Bible in Sweden can get you sent to jail. Certainly can get you put on trial. So that alone isn't enough, because you have to actually push back in a more significant way. Otherwise, the people at the top, who are certainly not religious and who are dedicated to an irreligious society, are going to squash it.
One final question on something else you wrote that came out about a week ago. You wrote Israel 50 years from now, which was your talk in L.A. At an event organized by the Children of Jewish Holocaust Survivors. Obviously, Yom HaAtzmaut is coming up Wednesday night this week, and that's Israel Independence Day. Could you give a quick summary of the best points from there?
The bottom line is that Israel has two paths if it wants to be around in 50 years. If it keeps on going the way it has, then its chances are not very good. On the other hand, Israel has to grow and it has to survive, and countries do grow and survive in response to pressures. Now, Israel is facing the Iranian nuclear bomb. It's facing the growth of a Palestinian state that isn't meant just to live side by side with Israel, but is meant to replace and wipe out Israel. And it's facing its own internal corruption and social problems that aren't easily going to go away. Israel is a fairly young country, but it's going to have to make some adult decisions if it wants to survive. Now, what Netanyahu is talking about lately, if Israel does hit Iran, if it declares a certain amount of independence from the Obama administration, that is going to be a major sign of adulthood, and it's going to be a promising sign that Israel will survive.
Daniel Greenfield, sultanknish.blogspot.com. Thanks as always for coming on.
Thank you.